Real quick, Dave, how's it going so far?
Well, it's absolutely wonderful. This is like going to be one of the very best conferences. It's socially fantastic, seeing old friends after COVID for so long, but it's also got so much condensed information.
I hear it's got great music.
And there's some pretty good guitar singing and stuff too. Yeah, absolutely. I used to be a brain geek. I made a living fine. Had a biofeedback office along the subway line. Then 5 times went bad, and though I tried, the money wasn't there. The bankers came and shut me down and told me fair was fair. And it wasn't fair at all. I tried for every kind of job. The answer always no! How you now? They'd always laugh. We just let 20 go. The government, they promised me a measly little sum. But I got too much pride to end up just another bum. And I thought, who gives a damn if all the jobs are gone? I'm gonna be a pirate. Arr. And rob the vendors from dusk till dawn. And it's a heath. Dressed in blue rags, stealing pence and you crap and all the other swag. And it's a ho. Hi. I did the hump. Good to see you guys walking missing one. I am the two. I think the local vendors would know that I'm a babe, but I found an unprotected booth just the other day. I snuck a break behind them, they were none the wiser. I knocked them over with my bag, they saw the sterilizer. They actually do sanitize those electrodes between demos. Who knew? I should not be taken lightly, pay attention to the rumor. I brought with me a toy so I could distract Boomer. I get creative when it's been a while since I've been fed. I walked away at the Q21 amp because I distracted Nick instead. Guess what? I did it with flashing lights. And it's a heat. Yes, a big two rags, thank you. Feeling fancy, new crap, all the other swag, and it's a ho! Hi! When you see you guys walking this and one attitude. Actually, that was my second verse. A bunch of brain geeks, they were pestering poor Terry. I should have felt quite bad for her, but I'm so dark contrary. And moseyed up to her booth, could not have done it faster. I walked away with a cigarette and my brand new brain master! NeuroNoodle, guys! NeuroNoodle! Came up to a booth talking about Hollywood actors. Distracted by the silver screen, they really didn't factor. We talked about old actors, but their sexy bursts of stride. And in the end, I got myself a Robert De Niro guy. And if he, that's a big two rags, stealing fancy new breath, and all the other swag. Where's my hey people? And it's a ho, right? Sergeant at Arms thought that he would follow me. With his nearsighted vision, I lost him in the lobby. Pulled off my Bowie knife and shaved off my mullet. He didn't recognize me, and so I picked his pocket. $28 and a condom. With Charlie rubbed his stone mounds and slippery electric gel. NeuroNoodle! Soon people flying on that floor so slippery. If you want to reach the cash bar, boys, you'll have to get by me. And I'm getting drunk tonight. Woo! And it's a heath. That's a big two rags, stealing fancy new crap, and all the other swag. And it's a ho! When you see you guys walking missing one eye attitude. Pirates like some peeling, but you don't just find us here. I hear that near Geekville there's a band of buccaneers. We uncontrollable, the conference system, you're too late, and you're gonna lose your lecture cap. My card days are over when the conferences are done, but that will put an end to my rainy, geeky fun. I'll be back in springtime, and now I gotta go. There's always lots of fun wherever I go. Everybody join in, and it's a he! Hi! Oh, that's a bit too right. Stealing fancy new breath and all the other swag, and it's a ho! Hi! Guard your boots when you see a guy walking missing one. I have it too.
Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology Podcast, featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
Good morning, Pete.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Oh, hey, Jay.
Oh, hey, Dave.
How are you?
Long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time for sure. Yeah.
How's Mind Alive?
You're doing pretty good. I'm working part-time now. I don't work full-time. I'm trying to follow Jay's lead here, but Jay probably still works full-time, even though he's trying to work part-time.
There's a difference between working and making money. I'm working. You guys are making money.
And there you go. Well, kind of. Well, like Jay says, how do you make a small a small killing at
a small fortune in neurofeedback. You start with a large one.
Yeah. I gotta say, this last machine that we're making now, that we're going to be talking about here a bit, it took us 10 years to make. It was a lot of R&D in that one. And,
Dave, get us up to speed from the last time that you were on. What have you worked on, and what are you working on now because we got new subscribers?
Yes, well, right now we're working on sort of applications, but we made a new machine. We call it the Premier, and a new iSet called the Spectrum iSet, which can be driven straight from a USB port on the computer. And so we've got sessions on Windows that you can drive it directly with. But we made a lot of changes with the device. There's a few things that we were looking at in the past that we wanted to implement. Like there's a study done way back at the turn of this last millennium, where they found that if you use electrostimulation and you change your frequencies every 3 seconds, you can stimulate all 4 opiates for pain reduction. You can do dynorphins, endorphins, enkephalons, and dimorphins. I think it's dimorphins and medenkephalons. And but you have to be able to change every 3 seconds. Of course, our old machines couldn't possibly. So the new ones can. Plus, we have color isets now, full color. You can do 10,000 colors. A lot of syntonics people like to be able to work with color. And it can be calibrated as well against a reference color source. There's one of the things that we kind of came on by, actually there's 2 other things we can do. One is basically it's a biphasic AND gate for electrical stimulation. And we do it by using 250% pulse widths, and they modulate against each other. I could show you what a picture of a simple thing looks like, but we're sort of generating kind of like what Neurofield is doing with brown noise, pink noise, and white noise on a brain level. So it's not like on sound, like audio is, it's on a brain level. And John LeMay is already doing some stuff with it on P300 response, showing significant improvements in P300 I think he's using the pink noise right now, which goes up to about 80 hertz, and it's all randomized. It's crazy randomized. The other stuff too is like the old machines, we could put about 30 modules in. Was this live, or is this are you going to edit all this?
We're
later?
always live.
Oh, you're always live. I didn't know you were live. Okay.
Oh,
Hi,
hello,
Mari.
stranger.
Hi, Mari. It's been a while.
It has been. How you doing?
Yeah. Yes.
We have equal representation now, Dr. Marie.
There we go.
I beat Pete up last week. I think it was. He still hasn't posted it. How come you haven't posted it?
Hold on. You'll see. You'll see.
Takes time to give it a good headline and get it out there, you know?
Oh, okay. Now we're really in trouble.
Do we have to sing both national anthems now?
Well, we can sing the Jay song.
This nationalism is what's getting us in trouble.
My national anthem, outside of the Barry Sturman song, is Jay, Jay the Magic Brain Man.
By the sea, and frolic in those stately lines in a land called QEEGD. With his pen and paper, he could not write enough. He had apps and wires and amplifiers and other fancy stuff. Oh, Jay, the magic brain man, lived by the sea, and frolic in the stately lines in a land called QEEGD. Jay, the magic brain man, lived by the sea, and frolic in the stately lines in a land called QEEGD. Onward he would travel, his knowledge went afar. He wore a patch upon his eye, but he never said ar, ar, ar. Go across the great sea, bow whenever he came. Niedermeyer and Kropotov would often quote his name. Oh, Jay, the magic brain man, lived by the sea, and frolicked in the squiggly lines in a land called QEEGD. Jay, the magic brain man, lived by the sea, and frolicked in the squiggly lines in a land called QEEGD. The profession lives forever, for not old men or boys, by programs and paper charts, pursue thought as toys. Mr. Neurologist meeting. One day it happened, paper charts they were no more. Jay no longer went to fold paper airplanes on the floor. Right? His head was bowed in sorrow, wavelets fell like rain. Jay no longer went to play in the 80s array. Technology had changed, old amps and rusted in the yard. But Jay was so completely thrilled when he bought his new guitar. Oh, Jay, the magic brain man, lived by the sea, and frolicked in those squiggly lines in a land called QEEGD. Jay, the magic brain man, lived by the sea, and frolicked in those squiggly lines in a land called QEEGD.
Oh,
Time to
yeah.
Puff the Magic Dragon.
And we'll put that right here.
Gosh.
Yeah. Or Pirates of the Conference. Remember I sang
Oh,
that one?
yeah.
That was funny. That was a good one.
See the coin, David.
I see that, yes.
It's about the size of a silver dollar. It's made out of nickel. It's a challenge coin that'll be handed out to folks at the Sassoon Summit. So,
Oh, nice.
I
Nice,
should get
nice.
one
That-
for each podcast.
Okay, I'll have to find a way I'll have to meet you at the border here, and so I don't get arrested.
That's a tricky spot to be
If
dangling
you can
around.
get there.
Yeah.
Within 100 miles.
Not joking here. Let's see if I get into APB. If they let me through.
I'll get you to drive up to Vancouver, and I'll meet you there. And
Yeah.
Take you out for dinner and trade it for a coin. So if I go to the US, I might not come back.
My difficulty is I don't know that I've got adequate documentation to be able to cross back into the U.S. even at this point.
They might,
You know,
yeah, they might arrest.
why would I don't have a driver's license because I can't drive.
Yeah.
And my passport's, long since passed. I barely leave the chair, so what do I need a passport for?
Yeah, just to walk your dog, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
You don't need a passport anymore. With Zoom, I'm losing my need for a passport.
Our co-host is on duty today.
That's right.
There he is. There he is, right there. Yeah.
Every time Pete's name gets mentioned, he barks.
So I don't know if you want to know a few more things about what we did.
Oh, God.
Sorry, Dave. Go ahead. Give us an update. Keep going.
So a few more things we did with this. We put a display on it so you can see what's going on, and you can see current, you can see impedances, you can see frequencies and all that stuff on the display. And this is probably a big breakthrough. This happens to be a TDCS session, so it's not going to run because I don't have it connected. But it's unhappy with me now because I don't have it connected. It has to see a connection before it'll run it. But everything too now is all on an SD card. There's an SD card plugged in the end. We were limited to 34 modules before on a session, and now we can do 1,000. And this is that is an important breakthrough because some of the sessions that we make, like the ones for the electrostim for the opiates, that 20-minute session, you're changing every 3 seconds. That's a lot of modules. And the one for the cerebral spinal fluid pump that we're going to talk about, it's got a few hundred modules in it as well. Yeah, so that's another thing. And also we can play background sounds, all kinds. So we got brooks, ocean waves, birds, chimes, a bunch of stuff. And you can add your own audio to it as well. And make
hey,
your own
Dave, for the non-nerds, like what can that machine help me with? What problems do I have besides being conservative?
Well, I'm not sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, we got to fix that. I don't know if the machine can fix that or not.
Gonna need a bigger boat. What does that thing do, Dave?
Yeah, bigger boat. Well, there you go. If you have a big boat, you don't need the machine at all until you sink your boat. Then you need the machine to deal with the big loss of your boat, deal with the stress.
You have that machine. Like, what symptoms are you correcting? Because the nerds understand what you're talking about, but the moms and dads, they're like, hey, what is that thing? Why would I need it?
Well, there's a few. We've always used it for stress and anxiety and stuff, depression to some degree as well. But sort of getting settled down, and we're finding out more and more about people who get burnout, for instance, people who push too hard, and then they start to develop adrenal insufficiency. And then when the adrenals start to go down, then it crashes the whole nervous system when your adrenals go down. Foggy head, exhausted, tired, depression. And then what we're finding is that people that have a tendency to cycle, when that crashes down, they get really exhausted, like I say, and then they just lay low for a couple weeks because they're too tired to do anything. Then the adrenals start to recover, then they get overly active again. And it's very slow, like a slow pass filter or slow pass integrator. The adrenals take a week to respond. And so then they slowly crash and they cycle up and down every month. And right now we're dealing with a fella he's a hardcore athlete, and he also works, he's a corporate guy too. And he does marathons all the time, and he's biking endlessly. And then he caught COVID, and he's been cycling up and down. Like, it looks like he's got manic depression, and he's been cycling up and down every month. And we're going to see about getting him either on the gear, or I think probably really low dose prednisone for a couple of weeks to give his adrenals a chance to pick up, and by taking the load off, and that might actually help him. So that's one thing we're working on, which is kind of new and interesting. Other things, the standard, what we've always been doing, but lately we've been adding, say, the stuff to be able to stimulate the opiates for pain. And we've been adding also this whole idea about pumping cerebral spinal fluid. We've been tinkering with this for a while, actually. But a beautiful study came out last year, which I'll show you about in a bit here. But many years back, I think it was 2004, Tom Budzinski and Leslie Sherlin, they were doing a study out of Seattle, out of 2 seniors' homes with age-related cognitive decline. And they had this one lady who was on the, who got into the study kind of by accident, and she had rapidly progressing Alzheimer's, and she was only 57. And this ties into what I've been talking about for about 10 years now on this, what I call a thalamocortical disconnect stuff. Not the same as thalamocortical dysrhythmia, different thing. But anyway, Tom had me build with that old machine, and we modified it so we could put like 120 modules in this thing. And he had it randomized between 8 hertz and 22. I don't know why he picked those frequencies, but it was it, and everything in between. But he did something really unique that I think was probably the piece de resistance. He'd go bright and then off, and bright and off, and loud and quiet, and doing all this. And I couldn't make any sense as to why he was doing that. He said it was just good to stimulate, you know, the brain in all kinds of ways. But it turns out that's how you pump cerebral spinal fluid, is by turning the stimulation on and off. And I think by dumb luck, he built a spinal fluid pump, and we didn't know about it till now. But so I'll show you the research behind that as well. The whole deal on cerebral spinal fluid is becoming a really big thing. So many things interfere with it. Anything that interfere with mitochondria seems to shut down the mechanisms and the glia and such that are involved in the circulation of cerebral spinal fluid. Plus, so many things seem to affect it. Poor sleep, low norepinephrine, certain sleeping aids definitely shut down the circulation of cerebral spinal fluid. It looks like viruses and stuff do. It's certainly a thing that's common between post-concussion syndrome, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. All 3 people have severe cerebral spinal fluid circulation problems, all 3 groups.
Really interesting, Dave, because just a side interjection is, you know, for years now, I think you're probably aware at the Swingle Clinic, we do CST. And we do it, you know, hands-on either before or after treatment. And the specific goal is to get the cerebral spinal moving. It's a hands-on technique. So the fact that you have a piece of equipment now that can do that, that's very, very intriguing to me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are. I've read about the hands-on, and there's also breathing techniques that can help enhance it. Even omega-3 supplementation can help increase, I don't know why, but it helps increase the circulation. But it seems to be that when people start to lose their circulation, something causes it to start to go down. And then the brain starts to fill up with, well, you could say go down just from having poor sleep. You'd go through a period of stress or something, maybe like 2 months of COVID or something, and you're not sleeping well. The brain starts to fill up with proteins and plaque, or maybe not necessarily plaques at this point, but certainly it fills up with garbage. And then that impairs cerebral function, and then it further impairs the circulation process and sleep. And once people start to lose their sleep, and then people who don't sleep well worry about sleeping, and then once sleep starts to go down, you know, it's difficult to recover it. And then they'll take, of course, sleeping aids, which might recover it for a week or two, and then they develop, you know, tolerance to the sleeping aids. And some sleeping aids actually impair the circulation of cerebral spinal fluid. So,
Dave, you jump in there, or do I? Sleeping aids help you pass out. You're not sleeping at all.
yeah.
So,
anyway, yeah.
My cerebral spinal fluid doesn't exactly circulate. It runs out my nose. So,
That can be a good thing.
Goodness knows what the impact of that's going to be. It sort of circulates. It doesn't circulate. It just, you know, drips out.
Yeah. What I mean by circulation in this case, it was more about the circulation of getting the sort of the debris out of the brain into the ventricles and such, and getting it disposed of. There's at least 3 paths known to dispose of
Well, apparently
It's the lymphatic system, right? The glia lymphatic system, right?
yeah,
So the fact that yours is dripping out might not mean it's actually getting out of the brain.
it's coming out my nose. It's cerebral. I have a cerebral spinal fluid leak. The surgical
Yeah,
entry failed because of brain pressurization on a flight back from Australia in 2018. So I've been leaking since then,
yeah,
and
yeah.
uh,
So you think it's
it,
getting?
it would take 2 surgeries to fix it, and I don't do well for recovery. So they'd have to put in a shunt first to take care of the pressure, or any patch they would put on would just pop. So
What about a wine
anyway.
cork?
I- are you telling me to cork it? And you're also talking about people who have a HPA axis issue with cortisol problems, and
Yeah,
I have no pituitary, so I don't have any regulation over the adrenals at all.
It's so unique.
you take a
So
steroid, yeah?
I eat hydrocortisone. So
Oh, you
I
do.
eat steroids, which would be normally produced by the adrenals, and
Yeah,
but then every hormone I have to take. If I have a hormone in me, it's because I took it. So
yeah.
there's no pituitary. The master gland is gone, so there's no production of anything. You have to take things. So
All right. Do you take stuff that stimulates it stimulates your adrenals, or does it just replace the
it,
hormone?
it just replace the
So you take like prednisone.
ACTH would be adrenal corticotropic hormone, which is
Yeah,
produced basically through the pituitary. That's how the hypothalamus pituitary has adrenal control, and that's missing. There's no pituitary, so there's no ACTH.
yeah,
So your adrenals produce more than just cortisol, mineral corticoids, and so forth. But I don't take any of the mineral corticoids because they give me hypertension that would pop a cork.
yeah.
But I eat cortisol. Hydrocortisone is cortisol. Breakfast of champions.
Oh yeah, yeah. So not prednisone, but hydrocortisone, which is a little closer, a better match, right?
Well, it's a direct match to cortisol.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prednisone is a little harder to control. Anybody who's end up with a dose pack of prednisone kind of gets the prednisone, you know,
COVID.
mania buzz at the beginning, and then it's
Right.
all tapers down from there, and that's not always comfortable. So.
Nope.
No, I
Understood.
wouldn't mind spinning back to something that Dave was mentioning, and between theory and science, I think we're a good group to yap about it. But Dave, you mentioned a pattern that I've also really noticed in both colleagues and clients. And you mentioned post-COVID, people with very, very good drive suddenly had these surge crash patterns. And in terms of clients, that this is being misdiagnosed as, manic depressive, et cetera, et cetera. Does anybody have any insight in terms of, obviously the big viral load of COVID, in terms of what might have happened or is happening in individuals that very good production, and then all of a sudden we have this dysrhythmia of sorts, apart from
Yeah.
aging, perhaps.
So if your cortisol drops because of adrenal failure, your brain swells. You don't have cortisol to suppress the inflammatory response, and when your brain swells, you have ischemia. Brain fog is ischemia. So the brain fog is basically there. The hydrocortisone would wipe away ischemic stuff due to lack of cortisol. There's other ways you can have ischemic change, vascular change with aging, and post-traumatic or migraine ischemia, those kinds of things. But even then, the inflammatory stuff kind of triggers those events.
I've had that a couple of times after a hardcore caving trip or climbing trip or even a biking trip. One time I did a bike from Edmonton to Calgary over 2 days, and it was 35 degrees Celsius out, which is so pretty hot. Fahrenheit wise, it's all of 100 or so Fahrenheit wise. And I got to Red Deer and I had heat stroke.
Yeah.
And I had to, it was 35 degrees. I arrived at this hotel and I was shaking like a leaf. I was so cold. And I had to jump into the swimming pool for a couple hours and cool myself down. But then I got to Calgary the next day and didn't give myself any chance to recover. And then definitely I was kind of like up and down for a while before things settled out. And I've done that more than once. So I'm starting to recognize this pattern in other people who push really hard. And then they'll get something they don't expect, say like COVID or a severe flu, and then it pushes the adrenals too far. And then they can't recover, right? And they end up with the cycling thing that goes on. Yeah.
Difficulty with replacement hormone if you have an intact system still, that the adrenals have failed. If you actually take a steroid, it cuts down on the pituitary's demand to produce ACTH. So intervening with a hormone can mess up the regulation of that hormone as well. So it's tricky. And you know, there's a reason that there's people that are called neuroendocrinologists, you know, and when you have no pituitary, you get to know one really well, you know. So every system ends up having regulatory loops, and the ACTH, adrenal and cortisol loop is a major one, and its failure is responsible for a lot of the brain fog because of inflammatory change.
Well, you know, this is where entrainment comes in just on that whole cortisol angle. I think entrainment helps a lot, partly because I think it kind of puts I'll put it to you this way. As you know, a lot of people, when things start going bad in their lives, they start to ruminate endlessly. And the rumination keeps cortisol flowing all the time until things start to collapse. And most people, by the time you see them, you know, they've been ruminating on something for months.
Yeah.
Maybe years,
yeah.
years before they finally fail the system, right? Entrainment gives people really nice breaks. It seems to break that. I don't know if you're going to call it breaking the HPA axis. I think indirectly it does, but it does so by dissociating people out of fearful thoughts, out of flight or fight. Because people will typically get extremely relaxed, and they will be relaxed for hours after they run a session.
Yeah.
And if they do it every day, it starts to give them, you know, several hours of a break. And that gives, over a few weeks' time, it gives the adrenals a chance to recover. The fog starts to clear, then they start functioning again. But during that fog, of course, they can have depression because that left side of the brain is kind of sensitive to all kinds of problems. And when brain doesn't work right, the left side usually goes first, and they end up with all this depression and hopelessness, and maybe suicidal ideation is going up, and they just really need to get rest.
Yeah.
And the entrainment will force them to get a rest for the most part. I'm not going to say it works 100% of the time, but it's probably 9 times out of 10.
I'm going to throw in the bidirectionality. You know, we talk about entrainment. We can also talk about disentrainment, you know, depending on, again, at our clinic, we've been using that for eons.
Yeah. I don't believe in disentrainment. We can have a discussion about that, but I don't believe it. I think it was a word. It was a word made up by Len Oakes. But you can't actually disentrain. It's like saying, when you've got noise canceling headphones, and so you hear noise in your headphones. So then they have a little microphone that injects the same sound out of phase. Yeah. It's not anti-noise or dis-noise. It's still generating noise, but it's canceling it out.
Okay.
Right. So as a disentrainment, if you use stimulation to take someone out of a stuck pattern, you're still entraining them.
Yeah. Now, what about tinnitus, where we actually are doing that, where you're trying to cancel the sound by putting in the sound? Would you call that an exception, or are you going to get me on terminology again?
Well, you know, I wrote an article on tinnitus. I haven't published it yet, but there's about 5 types of tinnitus. Yeah. And you kind of got to nail down the type you have, right? There's the stuff that is pressure in the eustachian tubes from blockages. There's issues with the tympanic nerve and artery and the auricular nerve and arteries, which happen with TMJ actually, get pinched behind the condyle and they can start to cause ringing. There's actual cochlear dropout from a loud noises that have damaged some of the cilia in the cochlea. And then there's, of course, from that, then you end up with the dropout in the auditory cortex. So the neurocortex over recruits neurons to try to get that frequency band back. And then you get ringing. And then there's all those other regulatory circuits that are more frontal based that have to do with inhibition and such like this like anti-sound, if you want to call it that, that are frontal based, which is some of the stuff that is being worked on now by, what's his name in Australia there, Dirk, and things like this. So
that's New Zealand. Dirk's in New Zealand.
New Zealand. Sorry. Yeah. There was a study that came out on TDCS recently where they were just putting the electrodes in between T3 and F7 and T4 and F8, and in hitting the cingulate path. And it was still effective.
In that circumstance, they're using four. You're either going to excite or inhibit the function at the anterior cingulate. But if you put an electrode there and an electrode next to it as a reference, you get surface currents. So to get the current to go deep to the cingulate, you put four reference points, F7, F8, T7, T8. And at that point, you actually divide the reference current by 4, so you have a minimal effect on the reference locations and maximal effect deep underneath. And you pick frontal or a little bit further forward for the affective division, but you can guide the currents deep. And Dirk's shown that higher density does actually get the current deep. Now, there are people that have multiple electrode high density, which are extremely expensive, and they have computer modeling as to what electrode gets what polarity and what current density. So where is the current going to go in the brain? They model all that and have the ability to kind of predict whether they're going to be stimulating the insula or the anterior cingulate or some deep source. And those are TDCS high density. That's kind of stuff is being studied at Harvard and other major medical centers.
In this study, they actually used just one electrode, cathode on the one side, just a cathode, and an anode on the other side. That was it. And normally, people have a tendency to put the anode on the left side and the cathode on the right, but these guys ran it reverse. Either that or they wrote the study wrong. But they just had two electrodes. Yeah. I was surprised it actually worked. But it did.
Well, one thing about studies, you need to see them replicated.
Yeah, true. True.
Recently, there was a meta-analysis of functional MRI studies. Basically, over half of them failed to replicate. And but then functional MRIs had a problem since the beginning that they realized with the dead salmon. The students brought in dead salmon, put them in the functional MRI scanner, and then went through the process that they were going to be doing with humans, showing them pictures of things that were emotionally evocative or not. And they actually got these dead salmon brains to respond to these pictures in their analysis. So there are analytic techniques that can create the thing that they're looking for, sort of. So you've got to know the people that are doing the functional MRI studies, whether these are seasoned, experienced researchers, or whether these are grad students doing their first study or something. So again, replication is absolutely needed in fMRI because they've been proven to have failure to replicate. But pretty much every journal you see out there has started to see their failure to replicate problem. So the Koreans, in their proving their stuff, they're getting gigantic populations. They're splitting that population in half. They're doing the study on one half of it, coming up with their findings, and then testing it on the other half. So they're doing within the study replication to actually show that their findings are real. But that takes that takes large N studies, and that takes capital. But they're well capitalized, so they're doing nicely. And they're working in association with a lot of major laboratories, Harvard and Oxford, and all the major hospital facilities in Korea, and that kind of masses of data end up being useful.
Certainly helps to have money. That's why big pharma always wins, and there's hundreds of other techniques. Like all of these neuromodulation techniques, neurofeedback, they just struggle and struggle because we don't have them.
I have a client, a neuropsychologist, and in neuropsychology, you would think they would do EEGs because it's neuropsychology, but they're paper and pencil testing. They come up with diagnostic opinions based on paper and pencil testing. Now, they have registries and state boards that regulate their practice, and in Washington State, the licensing board went after my client for doing EEG QEEGs because they said that wasn't appropriate for neuropsychology. And they actually went after his license. He was in court for 3 years with them, and he won. They paid him $165,000 for his time and trouble. And the person on the regulatory board who had a bone to pick about the EEG QEEG being used was thrown off the regulatory board for having cost them a small fortune. In a state regulatory board, it's not like their funding is able to take $165,000 and throw it away. They make income off of the licensing, fees and whatnot in order to operate, but they don't have a gigantic budget, for goodness sakes. So
and $130 or whatever $1,000 for 3 years of your life trying to fight this is nothing. But to spin back to the point, you could have somebody fresh, nothing wrong, I'm not being ageist here, but somebody essentially with a high school diploma and nothing else do the exact same thing, and nobody could or would stop them. That's the irony here, that you actually have somebody who knows what they're doing, and is exploring a technique with the appropriate knowledge, the appropriate limitations, knowing their boundaries, etc., and people go after them. It's a major issue. And if I could continue on my high horse here, the other thing I really hate is in terms of access to knowledge. People have heard me talk about technology, but the deconstruction of the libraries. When everything is going online, you need passwords or passkeys, or you need to pay $39 US to get to the actual knowledge. You used to be able to go into any university campus and read this stuff. So we're having this mass publicity on loud, unqualified people, and the gradual muting of individuals who have knowledge and individuals who publish knowledge. I think it's gone beyond dangerous, and I think the other thing is a lot of, I would say, professionals, credentialed professionals, need the liberty to hash things out, for example, Pete, on programs like yours, without any fear of repercussion of something that they say is going to be used against them, because it's the dialoguing, the curiosity about theory, that builds the science. And we need to be able to do this on public forums, because all of the bloody influencers who don't know what the hell they're talking about are doing that, and people are listening to them. Okay, there we go. Pete, you got another Dr. Mari rant.
So if I said something inappropriate,
Jay, you're an anomaly.
What do you mean if? When I say things inappropriate, I haven't fired myself yet. So
this is what we also
one thing about being self-employed you end up having a jerk for a boss, but that
Key,
you
key,
can't
But we
you
talked
can't
about
ultimately fire
grandmothering.
yourself. So
keyword is raw authentic.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But also, I mean, we have to throw in here grandfathering and grandmothering, that, there was a reason why we, initially we started to um, uh, disinterest ourselves in individuals without credentials, but we didn't properly grandmother or grandfather in people who really knew what they were talking about. And then you had this massive surge of individuals who were essentially pretending for publicity and money-making purposes only. Yeah. And I think our audience knows exactly what I'm talking about here. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've been asking, well, like you guys too, I've read thousands of studies, and people who don't know quite know science. And I got to say, I know so many psychologists who believe in every conspiracy theory out there, and they have no idea how to be objective and how to fact check.
Yeah.
They just believe the craziest things, and they'll do something on their, like 2,000 years ago in the old, like in the Middle East with the Old Testament, somebody would catch a flu or maybe get an infection off of bad drinking water, which they had a lot of problems with back in the Middle East, and get very, very sick for a while. And the priest would come by and say, well, I guess the word priest in those days, but the clergy would come by and say, well, tithe a couple of goats and we'll talk to God and see if you can get better. So he tithes a couple of goats, and a week later, sure enough, he's better. Yeah. So it worked. But so many people had confused correlation A with cause and effect.
Yeah.
But the other thing is too, when people don't understand those things and they only read a few studies, or people, I mean, there's always people now with their own, what's the word? They're pushing their own product, they're pushing their own thing, and it's not very scientific anymore. Maybe I'm guilty of that. I'm not sure. Hopefully not. I try not to be. And people just buy into it. And they don't understand. So they see everything as black and white. And when you see everything as black and white and you're the white guy, or you're the guy who's right, then they're very vocal because they're so certain that they've got this nailed down. Whereas professionals know that they've been blindsided by the black and white story too many times, and they know that there's a lot of gray going on. And so they don't speak up too much, and because they just know better.
And gray
It's
is very
it's easy it's
everybody
easy to believe something that's printed in a journal, but there are also journals out there that aren't really journals. There's predatory journals. There's Beale's list of predatory journals, and if you see the journal listed there, if you publish in them, your data can't be used in a reputable journal in a meta-analysis because your journal wasn't viewed as reliable with their peer reviewing and and also look at the impact factor. If you publish something with a low impact factor, nobody will read it. It's like burying it somewhere,
Yeah, but David, more and more and more and more of those, and this is a major, again, I don't want to name names, but I mean, there are some companies that I've been looking into because, Dave, they're doing things similar to you and similar to things we're doing at the Swingle Clinic. They've got big money behind them, blah, blah, blah. And then online on their websites, they have all these studies in these bogus journals. The issue is the general public can't tell the difference. And I'm going to use the two big words, reliability and validity, are totally lacking. So I think we need to educate the public. But the other thing, and here I'm really going to criticize my discipline and many others. It's just like the law, where we speak in legalese, okay? And some of the language that we use is completely exclusive in the negative sense, meaning it excludes the ability to read. So, I mean, one of the things I make a very best effort when I speak to the general public as opposed to my peers. I speak in an entirely different language, hopefully to be able to translate. The other one is just, all this flash and pan of these fancy words that don't mean anything as well.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the show and want to help us keep it going, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support helps improve the content and brings on great guests and grow the show. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/NeuroNoodle. But hey, if supporting financially isn't in the cards right now, no worries. You can still help us out for free by liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode. It really makes a difference and helps more people find the show. If we've earned it, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.
Yeah. Whew, you got me going again.
Hey,
Hey,
did you
Dave.
want to see my slideshow on this
Yeah,
stuff?
please. Yeah, let's see it.
Yeah, audiovisual entrainment. And I really got to say, like, I should qualify this a little bit. I am calling it audiovisual entrainment. And in the old days, Chris, we were really following, well, the original research done on stimulation, photic stimulation and auditory stimulation and tactile as well, was all frequency based, because that's all they knew. And so hence the concept of frequency following response or entrainment. But there's so much now that we're finding just works with just stimulation itself. You don't have to necessarily be really fixed to a particular frequency. You just need to stimulate, because all frequencies increase cerebral blood flow. All the frequencies increase cerebral spinal fluid, it would appear, although some are a little better than others. Most frequencies will certainly settle down a person, calm them down, so they induce a calming effect. It's lactate and ATP would be another example, and other things. So, although a lot of people play with the concept of entrainment, I'm getting less and less stuck to it. Because, in fact, I have found out, and I've got a patent now that I applied for a couple of years ago, where we found that mild randomization actually improves the effect. We don't randomize it a lot, up to plus minus 1 hertz, but that in itself will improve the effect of so-called entrainment. So if we're stimulating, let's say at 10 hertz, we are bouncing around between 9 and 11. And it's better than stimulating at 10. And we see this especially for cognitive stuff, but also for dissociation, like dissociating people into sort of this trance state where they finally just let go and they let all their stress go. So now I'm kind of calling it RAVE, randomized audiovisual entrainment.
The randomization is an important aspect here. If you stimulate at 10 and only 10, you're going to get leptokurtotic distribution, a too tall, too skinny distribution, and that's not resilient. Right. Resilience requires variability. Like heart rate variability, the more variable you've got a more resilient system. So in EEG, it's very similar. You can have somebody with a perfect 10 hertz, and everybody would say, oh my goodness, what perfect tuning. But if they have only 10, with no variability, that system can't take a shift in arousal level. It falls apart. The system shatters with stress. So your variable frequency stimulation is what Len Oakes was referring to as a disentrainment. You don't train at one frequency, you train in a range around it, and you keep people from being stuck on one. So, but however you want to refer to it, that's semantics. It is what it is, and it enhances the resilience and flexibility.
Now, we found if we randomize too much, it doesn't work at all. And we did some experiments with Ed Pygod, Greg Alter, and there was another, Jeff Tarrant. And we did, this is way back, right around 2000, believe it or not. And then I did cases over the last 20 years before I finally applied for the patent. But we found that if they randomize, like I say, up to plus minus 1, it is somewhat more effective than fixed. If they're doing plus minus 2, it loses its effectiveness to some degree. And if they're doing plus minus 3, it barely works at all. So there still seems to be a certain amount of an entrainment aspect that is important, but mildly randomized, it certainly improves. And too randomized, it doesn't work.
The systems have a center frequency with a surround, and the variability has to be surrounding that center frequency. If it's too broad, you don't end up having the center supported.
Right. Yeah. So here we go. There's a few different. So we're going to talk about the glial lymphatic system, or the lymphatic system, and this here is just an example of how you see the artery and the vein there, and how astrocytes play a role in dumping waste products of daytime metabolism into the veins, which then dumps it into the cerebral spinal fluid and into the lymph system and disposes of it. And it occurs best at nighttime, and so sleep is an important thing. But I'll show you some stuff here. Here's an example here. Here they're showing we've got pulsing coming in from the internal carotid artery. And this is also then causing increases in cerebral blood volume. And then there's movement of the spinal fluid in item 3 there. And then it causes a change at the jugular vein, internal jugular vein, and it can dump deposits into the jugular vein. But you can also see that there's a spinal canal pathway as well, where things get dumped into the spinal canal. And there's actually one that was found through the nose recently as well. So these are kind of the things that there's down-regulating factors of cerebral spinal fluid circulation, and there's up-regulating factors: exercise, sleep, lifestyle choice. I think stimulation in general probably makes a big difference, because the more things we do, the more we're going to have ups and downs in cerebral blood volume, which is going to be causing then pumping of cerebral spinal fluid as the brain is constantly trying to maintain intracranial pressure. And so people who are couch potato types, who just sit there and kind of do nothing all day long, are going to be at a much higher risk to having, I would say, these cerebral spinal fluid issues than people who are always active. And that's kind of what it shows here: the operating factors: exercise, lifestyle choices, good sleep, and so on. And good nutrition, I think, would play in there as well. And then on the down-regulating side, you've got altered permeability in the brain, neuroinflammation, and which can be caused by low cortisol. So burnout, the AQP4 polymorphisms and aging, and so on. And those are down-regulating factors. So this was an interesting study here showing norepinephrine, which is basically affected with our heart rate. Norepinephrine changes with our heart rate and our breathing cycle, and norepinephrine changes will cause a pumping effect in the brain for the cerebral spinal fluid, and helps to clear it better. But they found that the sleep aid called zolpidem or Ambien, that's a popular one, it suppresses the norepinephrine oscillations and lymphatic flow, and it can actually bring on, or what's the word, speed up the downward slide into Parkinson's and Alzheimer's by taking Ambien. And so that's been a discovery. That just goes to show how important this whole system is, right? So even if you improve someone's sleep, but you shut down their norepinephrine, you're going to have troubles.
Yeah. There's a difference between being unconscious at night with medication and actual sleep, where your brain is busy doing things that need to be done. Slow waves producing growth hormone, cleaning out the REM sleep, playing back memories so you long-term potentiate them. Those things are busy doing things. You can have Michael Jackson sleep and be unconscious at night with drugs. And Ambien, Lunesta, Zonata, all of those have a long washout time. And you end up having some difficulty with maintaining the sleep benefit of them long term. If you look at the PDR, the physician desk reference that talks about the drugs, you'll see that none of them are recommended for anything other than short-term usage. And that it can't be emphasized enough. There are meds that if you take them for 4 weeks, you have to be medically managed for your withdrawal. Their half-life is between 30 and 60 hours for a half-life washout. So if you take one today and you take your dose tomorrow morning, you still have half of what you took the day before still in you. So you build up and up and up, and the damage that it does to sleep is really astounding. You can have real sleep, or you can be unconscious at night, and using sleep aids typically ruins sleep. Now, trazodone can't be used long term either. And if your background alpha is slow, you can't really use it effectively. But trazodone can be used for sleep without damaging the sleep architecture. It does have an antihistamine effect to it, so using it long term also has potentiation of dementia related changes. Antihistamine and anticholinergic drugs end up potentiating dementia changes.
I'm going to chime in here, just taking the language down a level based on my previous critique, but anybody who's working with geriatric population, okay, and most individuals over a certain age, and definitely females, perimenopause, menopause, start to get sleep disturbance. And one of the key pharmaceutical interventions are quote unquote sleep aids, okay? And then in terms of how you start to, dare I say, manufacture or support the development of dementias. So if you're working with anybody, I would say 70 and over with any form of age-related cognitive decline, even dementia. I mean, get them off those sleep aids. And again, for females, I would go even younger because it's one of the first responses of certain folks in the medical community is to get people on sleep aids. And it can really, really affect age-related cognitive decline.
Yeah, well, the one that what's my curse or whatever is diphenhydramine, which is in Benadryl and in Nitol. And so people will take Benadryl for an allergy. There's a study that came out on diphenhydramine where they showed that when you took sort of the recommended dose of Nitol, which I think was 50 milligrams or so, by the fourth day, the tolerance effect was already occurring and the sleep was no better being on diphenhydramine than it was on baseline. And by the fifth day, it was worse. Yeah. And by the sixth day, it was worse again and then, of course, then you got to go off the drug and then they have full-blown and severe insomnia. Yeah. So people will take diphenhydramine, in Benadryl for an allergy and develop severe insomnia, not even knowing that the two are tied together, not even knowing it's the same chemical in both products because it's a depressing antihistamine. And the FDA and Health Canada has allowed both products to use the same darn chemical. And it's just wrong. But anyway, one of the things at the bottom is interesting here, the Alzheimer's pathogenesis, the degeneration of the locus coeruleus, the main source of norepinephrine. And in this here, I think they're talking about norepinephrine, of course, which has a general stimulating effect. I don't think they realize it also causes circulation of cerebral spinal fluid. And I'm not so sure they connected those dots when I read that study. So this is interesting here. So this is a study here of 2,442 subjects, married couples. And one of them had developed dementia and the other one was the caregiver. But of course, if you've got a spouse with dementia and they're getting up at any time in the night, you don't know if they're going to walk out the front door or light a campfire in the kitchen or who knows what. So the spouse, the caregiver spouse is waking up a lot too. And they found here in the results is that there's a 6-fold increase in the hazard for dementia in the spouses who were caregivers, just from having impaired sleep. And hence the importance of giant delta waves. Yeah, and when I say sleep, we're talking about non-REM, right? The big delta waves with the K complex. Now, here's another study on the E4 allele, which has been talked about a lot.
Slow wave sleep is not the same as a K complex. K complex is stage 2 sleep. Slow wave sleep is how much slow waves you have, usually greater than 50 to 75 microvolts, and they're in the 2-3 hertz range. And when there's greater than 20% to 30% on the screen, you've entered slow wave sleep. They used to differentiate stage 3 and stage 4 based on the percentage. If you're over 50% on the screen, it was 4, but there's no difference between 3 and 4. So that's now all just slow wave sleep. So, but that's not the same as vertex sharp waves. The vertex wave is the response to a sound during stage 2 sleep. If you have a good sleep spindle, you'll continue to go to sleep. If you don't have a good sleep spindle, that vertex wave will wake you up.
Right. Okay, we're talking about the giant delta waves, not like small little delta waves, which can happen just when you're relaxing with your eyes closed. It's got to be the big ones, right? Yeah, there you go. I'll go with that. But anyway, this study here looked at the E4 allele and how that was tied into, I think I'm pronouncing allele wrong. Is it allele? And how it's tied to Alzheimer's. And they found that actually with this gene, insomnia was the primary symptom, the side effect of this gene anomaly, which is probably why it plays out in Alzheimer's. So here we're looking at a bold and cerebral blood flow circulation in non-normals and Alzheimer's. And these guys found a couple of things that I thought was really interesting. They found that in terms of ventricular clearance, it was reduced by 23% and 60% fewer superior turbinate cerebral spinal fluid egress sites in Alzheimer's. But they also found that the nasal turbinate was a big part of the clearance system. And they're showing it right here. So normals have a fair bit of clearance up in the nasal turbinate area, whereas Alzheimer's people have reduced clearance. And that's this is a new thing. People didn't know that up until this point. I didn't know it up until last week. Here's another study. This is on Parkinson's. And now this one, they're looking primarily at the ventricle, the fourth ventricle. And they're showing here with controls, there's a fair bit of cerebral spinal fluid movement in the fourth ventricle area. And with Parkinson's, there's impaired movement of cerebral spinal fluid in that area. These are the things that we know so far of what entrainment or audiovisual stimulation does on the brain. We can tweak frequencies, like you would maybe with neurofeedback. We can dissociate people into trance states, which sets off all that flight or fight activity that so many people have. We can calm down the entire autonomic nervous system and break that HPA axis. And we've got biofeedback, monitors to show like respiration gets really good with entrainment. We've seen this with electrodermal, with EMG, with all the measures that things calm down a lot. Increases cerebral blood flow, and that's so well established. Lactate and also anaerobic adenosine triphosphate increase. Balances neurotransmitters with regards to norepinephrine, serotonin, endorphins. It improves that. Excite neurons and glia. It increases heat shock protein, activates non-specific, or there's like 30 of them, so non-inflammatory cytokines. That was done with gamma stimulation, that one. And it has also direct effects on neuronal stimulation. That was John LeMay's study on the P300 response and how much it improved. We're going to be talking about number 10, increasing cerebral spinal fluid circulation via the lymphatic system. We're going to be talking first about the thalamocortical disconnect and how this plays out. And I've been looking at this for a good 10 years now. And so I'm just going to show you one example. Now here's a guy here. This is one of my worst guys. He fell off a slide when he was 6 years old, and he crushed in his right temporal area about an inch. So it was pretty bad. They ended up air vacuuming him to the hospital and did some surgery and fixed him up. And they said, good thing he didn't have a concussion or a brain injury. But these types of post-inflammatory conditions is what I'm going to call them, because this low voltage fast, we've seen it, of course, mostly after concussion, because most of my clients have been concussed at one point, but we've also seen it post-viral infection. And I do have a good case of a girl who became anorexic after a severe flu. They all develop severe anxiety, they all develop severe insomnia, but they all become obsessive compulsive, and it shows high theta down the cingulate in every single person. So all my clients are hoarders, counters, cutters, ritualists, door knockers, tappers, anorexics. and they'll have this pretty much the same patterns. But anyway, this guy here, so the brain is foggy all the time. They can't think, they can't process, they can't hold a job, they can't learn really. They can't socialize, because socializing is a very intense, to be sociable, we got to be on the ball. And so they can't do all these things. So this guy here, he didn't have just that concussion, but he had a few other ones. And then he couldn't socialize. He really had trouble there. So he couldn't really keep a girlfriend. He lost his license in July 2013 from a DUI. Then he was in a treatment center for 6 months, and then he was in rehab, and then he was sneaking in alcohol. He was a binge alcoholic. A lot of my guys, my clients, because they're just going crazy in their own head, and they all self-medicate with something, whether they're taking alcohol or marijuana, or they're taking benzos, Klonopin, or something like this, and getting messed up on that. If it was my choice, I'd probably prefer to drink, take the pot, and take the drugs.
Right.
I think I'll have a better in the long run. But anyway, they all struggle with this stuff. And anyway, so he's been having all these issues. And I took a look at his brainwaves. Now, to get, when we do this, because these people can't make alpha, and if you don't have your room set up right where you're recording your EEG, you can easily suppress alpha. If it's too bright, if it's noisy, if you're drinking coffee, as a clinician, when you go in to do an EEG, you got to be sterile as possible. No coffee smells, no chocolate smells, no perfume, nothing, sterile as possible. So I have a nice room, it's dim, I have a really nice relaxed reclined chair, I have a footstool, I give them a light blanket, I turn on a fan for white noise, and we make it very conducive to making alpha, and they just can't possibly do it. You'll see though, this guy does make some of these low voltage delta waves right in here, but they can't make alpha for the life of them. And that room setup is real critical. I get people who send me EEGs and there's no alpha at all. And they go, Dave, I think we got a thalamocortical disconnect. And I say, well, tell me about the room. Oh, well, we're in Texas and we got a south-facing window and the sun is shining in and it's so bright and beautiful. I go, oh, dude, you just ruined it. You got to have a dim room. It's too bright for the guy to make alpha. Or they start talking politics. And politics can really mess up a person's alpha waves if you're on the wrong side of the fence compared to that person's political beliefs. Bang, flight or fight immediately. And they're not going to make alpha. Mm-hmm. You got to be very, very sterile if you want to try to get a decent recording. But this is the thalamocortical dropout right here. And you can see there's no alpha waves. It's gone. The thalamus is disconnected. They lose over 1 trillion action potentials a second when that happens. Okay, I'm not sure why I have that there again. So put them on entrainment. Now, with all the things that entrainment does, we're not quite sure what the actions are with entrainment that will suddenly re-excite the thalamus back into the system. But this fella here, he's 15 minutes down. This is 15 minutes post alpha beta entrainment. And suddenly, he's making massive alpha waves. And they also fall asleep because they're so tired. So they make giant delta waves and they're making alpha waves all through. And then the fog clears immediately and they sleep 10 hours that night rather than 3 hours, which is typically what they're sleeping. And so now this is how much he's changed. So you can see the difference between this and back here, right? Quite a bit of difference. And often they do end up running a little fast for a couple of weeks. I don't know why. But nonetheless, we do reestablish their alpha and they have to get their life in order. So he slept for 30 minutes after it ended, and that's pretty common. Slept 11 hours that night. Continued sleeping well, using this every day, and his anxiety went way down. He had no cravings. This is 9 days later when we did a follow-up. He had no cravings during those 9 days. He had no anxiety. He was rested and grounded. He was sharper mentally. He quit drinking entirely. We saw him in October 2016. And in 2017, he quit drinking January. And he was a binge alcoholic. And now he's fully employed as a heavy equipment operator. And this is 3 years later, we looked at his alpha. He's still making beautiful alpha. He just had to boot the brain up. And it makes such a big difference on their lives. So here we're taking a look at, this is looking at microvolt levels, and you can see how much we've kicked in on a microvolt level. So this is not Z-scored. All his alpha that was really not there before. And this was him 5 years now out, alcohol-free. Before, he couldn't go a day without drinking because his brain was driving him mad. And now he's 5 years alcohol-free, and he's sober 5 years. So we're working a lot with this kind of a population, and that's why I brought this up. These guys, whether it's viral or whether it's concussive, but it's a post-inflammatory condition, so they can be completely clean on MRIs and CT scans and all that stuff. But they've got this post-inflammatory condition that is causing these issues. So let's take a look here. So this is a study that was done by Williams in 2023. Now, with Williams, this was just a proof of concept study. They had no clinical ambitions with it at all. It was just showing what could happen when you stimulated the brain with light. And when I read the study, of course, I connected the dots in like 3 seconds. But so they tried a whole bunch of different frequencies. But they found that 8, 12, and 40 actually had stronger effects, although they were all pretty good at stimulating cerebral spinal circulation or fluid circulation. So there's 2 experiments they did. We're going to take a look at these 2 experiments. So here they're using a visual stimulation. They're turning on a checkerboard pattern that's flashing back and alternating those checkerboards for 16 seconds on and 16 seconds off. They actually tried all kinds of intervals for on-off cycles. They tried the different frequencies, and they settled on 8, 12, and 40 as being the best frequencies to use with a 16-second on-off cycle. And they're measuring down here the movement of cerebral spinal fluid through the fourth ventricle, which drains into the spinal cord and then exits out through the lymph system. And so that's where they were looking. But as we saw in some of the other studies, there's other places where you can drain as well. So looking at the blood oxygen level here, what they're finding is that when here's stimulation on, then off, and then on, and we can see how these cerebral spinal fluid is pumping out when the stimulation is on, because blood flow is increasing in the brain and all the arteries are expanding. And so the brain has to dump cerebral spinal fluid to maintain a balance of intracranial pressure. But then when they turn it off, well, now there's an absence of intracranial pressure, so it has to bring cerebral spinal fluid back in. And so that's what's going on. So they've got this pumping action going on. Experiment number 2, similar idea. They were just replicating experiment number 1, basically. So they're showing that. And I'll just leave this on for a moment here. It explains what's going on for people who want to read this, or they can pull the study. Williams 2023, you can find that online, or I can send them a copy if they want. Either way. So here's they're looking here now at different durations, 0.2, 0.5, 1, 2, 4, and so on, and up to 16 actually. And they're looking at the spinal fluid flow, and these are the blood oxygen flows and the spinal fluid flows. And we can see here that as oxygen is going up with these different intervals, the spinal fluid is going down, and then it's reversed. When blood goes down, spinal fluid comes in. And then they looked at different frequencies, 4, 8, 12, and 40, and they were all pretty matched. They're pretty close. On stimulation, then off, and then on again. And then they're comparing that against the cerebral spinal fluid. So it's very basic. Cerebral blood flow goes up, cerebral spinal fluid pumps out. Cerebral blood flow goes down, the brain brings in cerebral spinal fluid. But in the process, of course, they're exchanging all the debris and such that is in that spinal fluid, and they're dumping it and cleaning it up. These are all their findings. And we, of course, add auditory to it. We're not just doing visual, we're also adding auditory. And auditory stimulates a fair bit of brain function too. So these guys were getting roughly a 10%, a 9% exchange of cerebral spinal fluid during every cycle of on-off stimulation. So 16 seconds on, 16 seconds off. If you add audio, I'm not sure how much the audio adds to it because we have not done that research, but I'm sure it's adding a significant amount to this as well. And of course, we do both. So how does this tie into Alzheimer's now? Let's say, so here's the study that was done, Leslie Sherlin and Tom Budzinski that we talked about earlier. And he had me design this wacky session, 9 to 22 hertz, bright, dim, loud, quiet, all these weird things going on. And here's this lady here, a 57-year-old female, and this is pretty young to be developing Alzheimer's, but it seems to be tied with the inability to make an alpha wave. So a thalamocortical disconnect, which I just showed in the binge alcoholic, they all end up down this road, these people. Although with athletes, they'll call it chronic encephalopathy, right? Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. But it's really, from what I can tell, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's basically as well, and CT are exactly the same condition. From a brain perspective, they can't make alpha for one, and they can't get pumping going on. And they don't sleep well, so they don't make the delta waves that are needed to make pumping. And so we could, with this study here, we can pump them during the day. But anyway, so this is this patient that was in the study that Tom and Leslie Sherlin were doing. And so they gave her 30 sessions, pseudo-random, 9 to 21. So baseline was Q1. After 30 sessions of now so we're calling this entrainment, but it's kind of ish, not really. I mean, he only takes 10 seconds to entrain, and a lot of his segments were 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds long. So there were entrainment bits here and there, but he was jumping up and down all over the country. So it's kind of AVS-ish and entrainment-ish. Anyway, they did 12 weeks of this, 30 sessions, and then that was their Q2 measure. And then she was so well, so functional, she went home. She moved out of the senior center where she was shuffling around for months. And she moved home and lived in Seattle. But she would walk to the seniors home where they were doing the study on her own now through Seattle. And on occasion, because she felt that it was still helping her. And so that's Q3. So occasional treatments with the entrainment. And then nothing after between, this is at 6 months, and then she did nothing between 6 and 10 months at all. And the brain still continued to improve. So here's what they found. And of course, a picture is 1,000 words, so I'll just show you the pictures. So here they're looking at compared to baseline. So blue means that in this case, the delta activity in the temporal lobes went down after 30 sessions. After oh, sorry, this was at baseline, yeah, in 30 sessions. So Q3 is just at the 6 months. You see further declines in delta. And at 10 months, further decline still, even though she had no treatment between 6 months and 10 months, she was still improving. And that's one of the neat things with the brain. Once you boot the brain up and it starts getting cognitive and functional, it will keep itself going because it knows what it's doing. It knows what it's doing, and it's more functional, and it's grasping way more data in a person's life, thinking way more processes in a person's life, and it's keeping active, and that's going to keep the exchange of cerebral spinal fluid and blood flow continuing to happen. And with dementia, there's very little exchange of anything. So here's what was interesting, though. So I had them. I had them in 2017 or so when I discovered all this. I had them send me all their data. And what we found is just like that fellow who was the binge alcoholic, she had no alpha at the start, at baseline, but she had a nice alpha peak after entrainment. So we booted up her system, and in the process, everything normalized, and she got better. So here's what they concluded. Now, they called it AVS, and I could say that might be a more accurate way of saying it. But it seems to restore some degree of spatial ability. For example, following AVE, she was able to accurately find her way around a several block radius, including the distance from her home to the site of the AVE training. Her walking style improved from the shuffling flat-footed stride of many Alzheimer's patients to a more normal gait. She reported that the cognitive fog lifted after her training. They did the microcog reasoning scale, and she was now in a more normal standard group. So they concluded that entrainment or stimulation appears to produce improvement of the current density. That's like your Loretta findings that we were looking at, of various brain regions that are involved in Alzheimer's disease progression. The results appear as early as the first session and last through the continuation of the 30-session training period. Now, I'm always looking for people to do studies, so that's why it's in there. So that's basically the lecture right there. Now, I got to mention that we've got a Parkinson's client right now. He was diagnosed in 2019, but he lost his sense of smell 15 years ago. And that is a thing that occurs with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. They lose their smell long before their symptoms show up. And so he's been using this pumping session since about mid-January. And 3 weeks in, he smelled dinner. And then he smelled, a few weeks later, he smelled someone wearing perfume. And then there was a kid's party and he could smell all the hot dogs. And he was so excited that he was getting his smell back. Plus, he was unable to write before. And now he can sign checks and it'll pass as his signature. And he owns a business, so he does check writing to some degree anyway. And he can write again, he can type again. And one of the things that he could not do before, and I mean, this is pretty amazing. He can stand on one foot and put the sock on the other foot while standing. And before he could never do that. I mean, how many of us can even do that now?
I can't.
No, that's pretty amazing. You can?
I cannot.
Oh, you cannot. No, I know that. So he's been practicing these things because he's really trying to get his functionality back. And he is quite close to normal now to what he was, 10 years ago. Even better because he lost his smell 15 years ago. So we've got an N of 1 and it's looking really positive. And now I've got another client and she's in pretty rough shape. She's falling in things and she can't write anything. And I've got her now using this as well. If you want, I could give you like a 20-second demo of what it sounds like. I can turn on the sound. And okay, I'll just close this here.
Yep.
Let me see now. Let me just close that. So this is the session that we actually use. You can see it here. And these are all the modules I've got in here. And this is just, these are all the modules in that 20-minute session. I mean, it is on and off and on and off and on and off. And this is how we actually designed the session right here. And these are colors that I use in the lights. The tones turning on and off all the time. And so, for instance, I'll just show you a sequence here. At 2:01, for instance, we're running at 13 randomized. That's what that little the tilde is, randomized. And we're turning the sounds on and off. So if I go here to more, and I will share computer sound. And I will turn this up to max. I think you'll be able to hear it. Now we also, when it turns off, of course, it's just this dead void. And if people found it a little unsettling to have this sudden dead void after all the stimulation. So we have a heartbeat that plays and helps give people a sense of being relaxed and calm. But also I'm typically playing a babbling brook. And so you hear this water flowing, and it's really pleasant. You can put on chimes or birds or rain, or we got all kinds of background sounds you can pick to help a person feel more calm and more relaxed and more compliant with the session, right? So here we go. I'll just turn this on. Let's see. I'll just pick. I'll just go to the 2-minute mark here. Right about there. That's pretty close. Here we go. Here we go. Yep.
Hey, Dave, we had a great time here together, and people are like, okay, great, Mind Alive. I haven't seen Dave in a long time. Where do we send them? mindalive.com?
Yes, that would be fine. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you. That'd be great. Yeah, we got more coming down the line. I mean, we've got so many things happening with this new device that we could not do with the old device. Like this ability to stimulate 4 different opiates at one time for pain, for chronic pain. And we can blend it with the audiovisual entrainment because most people with pain struggle with depression or anxiety. So we can give them an alpha session or a depression protocol at the same time we're stimulating all their opiates. So I'd be happy to do another one if you like on this topic. And there's a few other things that are in the fire too that, I'd be happy to share.
Can we bring you back, Dave?
You sure can.
I mean, we record this at this time every week. Anytime you have an open invite, anytime you'd like to come on, Dave. You're old school, man. We love you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Dave Siever, mindalive.com. Thank you so much for showing up in the NeuroNoodle Neurofeedback Podcast.
Thanks very much for doing this, Pete.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend, buddy.
And you too. Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.